Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to be recording my playoffs and play-in predictions for the 2025 NBA postseason. What a crazy slate of games today as the regular season wrapped up. Of course, there was some awesome moments. That Warriors versus Clippers game was complete, absolute cinema. And I hope you guys do enjoy the content here today at Utility Sports. If you do, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more uploads coming soon. And again, as you guys could predict, these are my predictions for the NBA postseason. We're going to look at the NBA postseason bracket. We're going to look at the NBA play-in matchups and discussion. We're also going to look at the first round matchups with specific previews. I'm going to touch on a lot of things that I think are going to be very important to watch for, whether it be for the teams that are building up something long term, which young players do we have to keep an eye on, and then obviously giving my series predictions as well throughout the course of the first round, and then ultimate NBA playoff predictions as well at the end of the video. So not only will you get those first round predictions that you're looking for, those play-in predictions you're looking for, but you're also going to get overarching playoff predictions, who I think could win the title, which teams will make the NBA Finals, for example. That will all be in today's video. So again, I hope I'm delivering on everything you're wanting to see in this video. If that is the case, again, smash that like button and subscribe for more future uploads. We have a lot of content coming out soon. And here is that bracket. The Mavericks and Kings, the 9-10, will be facing off in the play-in. Of course, the Kings will be at home for that one. Big question for me, will DeMar DeRozan's daughter be in attendance? Think about the impact she had a few playing games ago, a couple years back against Toronto. Raptors fans can definitely attest to that. So it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. The Kings have a lot of seasoned play-in experience with both Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan. They know a thing or two about the play-in. Jonas Valanciunas, another example. And then the Warriors, another play-in team. Now, remember, the 7 and 8 do have an advantage over the 9-10. In order to make the playoffs as a 9 or 10 seed, you have to win 2 straight games. You have to win in the 9-10 matchup, and you have to beat the loser of the 7-8. So it's a lot harder to make it into the playoffs from the 9-10 perspective than it is to make it through the 7-8 seeding because of that, because you have 2 chances to win one game if you are a 7 or 8 seed. Now remember, the Warriors lost in overtime, a real stunning defeat against the Clippers at home. A really difficult defeat, honestly, especially with how that game went. They had opportunities down the stretch. It was a very good game, but unfortunately they come up just short, fall all the way down to 7 in the standings. But they've been brilliant with Jimmy Butler. Obviously, the Grizzlies, a team that had a big shakeup as well, firing Taylor Jenkins at a very interesting part of the season, and they find themselves barely in the playoff hunt here at this point in time. Then you look at the Eastern Conference. You have the 9-10 matchup being the Chicago Bulls and Miami Heat. Feels like every single year we can pencil these two organizations into the play-in tournament against each other. Just feels like every single year Chicago finds a way to hang around, be a 9 or 10 seed. The Miami Heat were the 8 seed that knocked off the 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks, made it all the way to the NBA Finals on the back and shoulders of Jimmy Butler. Now, no Jimmy Butler there to save them this time, and lost in a stunning defeat ultimately against the Washington Wizards in Game 82, which has pretty significant implications for draft lottery perspectives. But nonetheless, the Heat do have an uphill battle ahead of them as the 10 seed. Then the 7-8, again, the Atlanta Hawks, feels like you can always pencil them into this kind of range when it comes to the end of the season. With a 40-42 record, they are once again in the play-in. Just feels like this team constantly is hovering around 500 despite Trae Young's brilliance. And then the Orlando Magic, as the 7 seed, obviously dealt with so many injuries this year. This is a very good team, and one that I think is going to be capable of handling business. So when we get to my play-in predictions here, let's start back out west, the 9-10 matchup, Kings versus Mavericks. I do think the Kings beat the shorthanded Dallas Mavericks. The Kyrie Irving ACL injury has obviously been devastating for this overall season. The Kings have that play-in experience. They know what it takes to play in the play-in, and they have that kind of camaraderie with the DeRozan-Levine pairing, obviously. They've gone through playing games together before, so I think the Kings do get out of this 9-10 matchup. We put them into that winner 9-10 right there, and then you have the Warriors-Grizzlies. I do think the Warriors ultimately win as the 7 seed. They get bumped all the way up to the 7 seed, where they will be taking on the Houston Rockets. We'll talk about that playoff matchup soon. So then in the winner of 9-10 versus loser of 7-8, it is Kings versus Grizzlies. And as a result, I do think that the Memphis Grizzlies ultimately do win. As you can tell, I have a huge preference toward the 7-8 seeds. In this, it's just a lot easier to pick and predict them moving on because they have 2 chances to win 1 game, and they've been better throughout the course of the year, right? There's a reason that they are the 7 or 8 seed compared to the 9-10. They have a better record. They've been better throughout the course of the season. And specifically for the Grizzlies and Warriors, they have a very significant wins advantage. 8 more wins than Sacramento, 9 more wins than Dallas. So they're just better teams. They're healthier at this point of the year as well. I think both the Warriors and Grizzlies ultimately do make the playoffs as the 7 and 8 respectively. Going back out east, we're looking now at the Bulls and Heat in the 9-10 game. I will pick the Miami Heat to upset the Chicago Bulls. Now this year, the Bulls have actually had the Heat's number, but that's not always indicative of what actually happens come postseason time. Last season, in the 2023-2024 year, the Phoenix Suns dominated the Minnesota Timberwolves in the regular season, winning all 3 of those matchups. Then the Wolves ended up sweeping Phoenix in the first round of the playoffs. So, you know, the regular season, while it is a good litmus test of what these teams really are, it's not always a perfect indicator of how the postseason goes. And I think Eric Spoelstra, the Miami Heat, with their experience through the play-in, winning in the play-in, and ultimately trying to make the playoffs, I do think the Heat will beat the Chicago Bulls, which is A-okay if you're a Chicago Bulls fan. For the 7-8 matchup, I do have the Orlando Magic beating the Atlanta Hawks. There in that one, the Magic ultimately clinched the 7 seed, go on to face the Boston Celtics. I think the Magic combination of length, size, defense is going to be huge for them in this game against Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks. That will push them into the postseason. Then in the final matchup in the play-in for the 8th seed, it would be the 8th seed Atlanta Hawks versus the 10 seed Miami Heat. And I ultimately do have the 8th seed Atlanta Hawks again. So just once again betting on the 7-8s. They've been better throughout the course of the season, and specifically have an advantage when it comes to having 2 opportunities to win just 1 game, whereas the 9-10 need to win 2 in a row to make the playoffs. I think it's just a lot safer to bet on Atlanta and Orlando to ultimately make the playoffs here. So the Magic slot in as your 7 seed. The Hawks are your 8 seed to take on the Cavaliers. We'll talk about those matchups here in just a second. I also want you guys to comment your predictions down below as well. I want to hear your thoughts. Who's going to win which matchups as we talk about them in this video. So here we are with the first matchup I want to talk about, and it is the East 1 seed versus the East 8 seed. And of course, with my play-in predictions, that is now the Cavaliers versus Atlanta Hawks. And I do think this is a very fascinating matchup to talk about. The Cavaliers actually struggled a bit this year against Atlanta, and some of Dyson Daniels' best defensive performances came against Cleveland this year, where he did hold Donovan Mitchell to sub-effective shooting nights from the floor. But I do ultimately think Cleveland is still the better team here, despite some of their struggles, especially early in the season, back to the in-season tournament kind of era of the regular season. That's when Cleveland and Atlanta really had some of their early matchups this year. So even though Cleveland has struggled at times against the Atlanta Hawks, the teams do look a little bit different now. Specifically, DeAndre Hunter, with a chance for revenge against his former team. I just think the Cavaliers are a better team, a deeper team. There's a reason they won as many games in the regular season as they did. You look at their core 4 with 2 bigs who are extremely talented and defensively gifted in both Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, then 2 extremely offensively skilled guards in both Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. I do think this is just a lot for Atlanta to try and handle, and even if Dyson Daniels is defensively brilliant against one of Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell, there's so much easy offense for the Cavaliers to find. Their pick and roll game's been dominant all season long. And I do think they're just flat out a better team than Atlanta. Now, Trae Young is good enough to win you a game or 2 alone, and I think this postseason is going to be a very good test for him once again. Every single year, it just seems like he's able to carry so much load, carry so much of the offensive kind of creation aspect that the Hawks rely on him to do. that he's going to make this semi-competitive in a series. I don't think that the Hawks will get swept. I think that Trae Young is good enough to win a game here. And the Cavaliers have been a team that have struggled in the playoffs a bit. Remember, last year in the first round went 7 games against Orlando. A few years ago, there was the infamous Jared Allen quote where he said the lights were brighter than we expected. I still can't believe he said that to this day. The Cavaliers, I do think, even though with a brand new head coach in Kenny Atkinson, who they've been great all season long, there is going to be, some small bumps in the road for them along the way. So I don't expect a sweep here, although a gentleman's sweep is very much in the cards, I think. I think Cleveland's just a lot better than the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks have a sub-500 record for a reason. They are a flawed team, especially without Jalen Johnson. We've seen how reliant they are offensively on Trae Young. The Cavaliers do have some size to throw at him. They have quickness, some length on the perimeter with the DeAndre Hunter acquisition. They have better depth than Atlanta has in terms of offensive creation. And I also think one thing that Atlanta doesn't have that will be a challenge for them is this combination of bigs, right? They have their own USC big man in Onyeka Okongwu, but I just think there's levels to this. And the Hawks are just outmatched, especially in the front court in this matchup, in my opinion. So even though the Hawks have had a pretty feel-good story season this year, they still find themselves kind of in the same boat they've been the last couple of years where, they get in through the play-in, lose in the first round, and questions are going to start getting asked about Trae Young's future there with the Atlanta Hawks moving forward. The 1 seed and 8 seed in the Western Conference through my play-in predictions are the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have been nothing short of dominant this season, one of the best regular seasons of all time, very arguably the best regular season of all time. If you look at their average plus minus, the overall net scoring for them this year, they were literally statistically the best team ever from a net standpoint in terms of how much more they outscored their opponents throughout the course of the season. A lot of blowout wins. The Thunder are, I think, one of the most underrated playoff teams of all time. If you look at, the narration around them right now and how people are saying, well, this team, they're young, they're inexperienced. Last year they lost in the second round of the playoffs. These are all people who are using excuses and not really sure how good this Thunder team are to try and diminish them going into this postseason. The Oklahoma City Thunder are absolutely incredible, and they are going to be very, very likely the team that represents the Western Conference in the NBA Finals. They are so good. They are so loaded. They are so talented. Now, there are a few things I am a little concerned about. What does their three-point volume look like? Now, I know that their three-point success rate, their actual three-point percentage as a team is going to be very good. They have talented shooters. They have good shooters. I just want them to shoot a lot of threes and help them win. Last year, one of the most important stats that I came across through my own research was the impact of three-point makes in series. I believe out of the 15-ish, 17-ish series in the NBA playoffs, 15 or 16 of them were won by the team that made more threes in the series. So for Oklahoma City, the three-point volume is going to be a huge barometer for me throughout the course of the season. I'm very, very interested to see what that number actually ends up looking like for them throughout the course of this playoffs. But Memphis is a team that they've owned throughout the regular season. They swept them in the regular season this year. They are significantly better than Memphis. The Grizzlies just recently fired their head coach. Ja Morant is debuting a new celebration every single day, seemingly. We'll see if he pulls out an RPG or something in this playoff series. But I don't think he's going to be pulling out a ton of W's. I think the Thunder walk through the Memphis Grizzlies rather comfortably here, winning 4 games, maybe 5, right? You always want to give a little bit of room for a hiccup, but I really do think the Thunder are good enough to pretty comfortably sweep the Memphis Grizzlies. So that is ultimately what I'm going to predict here. The Thunder over the Grizzlies in 4 games. I feel very, very good about this prediction. And the Grizzlies go into the offseason with a lot of questions. Who is the franchise's next head coach? What's Ja Morant's future in Memphis look like? Does Jaren Jackson Jr. have his name start coming up in trade talks? We'll see. There's a lot of questions, and I think the Memphis Grizzlies are going to have a lot of answers that they need to figure out yet. But they're not going to have a ton of answers for this Oklahoma City Thunder team, that's for sure. The East 2 seed versus the East 7 seed. This is the Boston Celtics versus Orlando Magic, and I think this is one of the more fascinating matchups. I talked about that playoff stat and how important three-point volume is. A team that really stood out to me last year in the postseason, we've already alluded to this series once in this video, was the Magic versus Cavaliers in round 1. Remember, that series went 7 games. The Magic won 3 of those 7 games, of course. But guess what? The 3 games that they won were the 3 games that they made more threes than their opponent. And yes, it is kind of basic math. Yes, if you score more points than your opponent, you win that game. But specifically for a team like Orlando, who doesn't have the greatest three-point success rate, three-point volume, there is a lot of concern for me about this team going into this postseason, especially against a team like Boston, who constantly dominates the three-point rate conversation. They do a great job at limiting three-pointers, both in terms of volume and efficiency on the defensive end of the floor, and then offensively, they get up more threes than anyone else. Their combination of ram action, slips, they do a great job setting up high ball screens far enough away from the three-point line to set up advantage through slips where you get 4-on-3 opportunities, which sets up drive and kick for them. Also, they have just the overall shot-making talent to win in isolation. We've seen Jason Tatum, we've seen Jaylen Brown succeed in that way as well. I am hoping we get to see a fully healthy Jaylen Brown this playoffs. The Celtics maybe do take a cautious approach and rest him a little bit throughout the course of the postseason. Remember, last year they played a very cautious approach with Kristaps Porzingis en route to Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and company's first NBA title. I think that they're very much in line possibly to win a second title consecutively. Going back to back is extremely hard, but they're not going to struggle that much against Orlando. I think that they beat Orlando pretty comfortably. The Magic are a very good young team. I don't want to take anything away from them, but they're not Boston Celtic good. The Celtics are really, really talented, really great team. They have a very good collection of depth. Peyton Pritchard might win Sixth Man of the Year. Al Horford, one of the best bigs in the NBA, still at his age, which is incredible. He doesn't have all the numbers and all the stats that suggest that, but when you watch the game, you feel his impact. He's extremely essential. Porzingis has continued to be their offensive cheat code when he's healthy and on the floor. They're really, really tough to beat. And I just think with their overall collection of talent up and down the roster, you look at the depth, even guys like Baylor Shireman have stood out as of late too, who I love pre-draft. So I just think Boston is a better team than Orlando. Again, it's not a slight to the Magic. They're going up against the team that is the reigning NBA champs for a reason. And I think the Boston Celtics win this series in either 4 or 5 games. I'm going to lean toward 5 because I do think the Magic have a good enough defense to really force Boston off their game for 1, maybe even 2 games this series. But ultimately, the Celtics I have winning in 5 games pretty comfortably. Now, this is what playoff basketball is all about right here. The West 2 seed versus the West 7 seed. This sums up the Western Conference playoffs over the last 10 years, does it not? The Houston Rockets back once again for the first time post the James Harden era of Houston Rockets basketball, and they find themselves in, once again, a heated matchup against the Golden State Warriors, and this is going to be absolute cinema. I am so excited for this series for so many different reasons. The Houston Rockets, such a defensive-oriented team, a young, unproven team. Their leading scorers, Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, no playoff experience. And you're going up against a team that has 4-time champion Steph Curry, 4-time champion Draymond Green, multiple finals appearances for Jimmy Butler, and a team that has really meshed and gelled and clicked post All-Star break there in Golden State. This is going to be such a fun matchup. Now, both teams do things that are going to challenge and really put these other their opponent, each other, in a bind throughout the course of this series. First of all, what I want to talk about with Houston is their ball pressure. I think that they can extend out their perimeter defense to a level and a rate that not every other team in the league is capable of. The sheer depth of perimeter defensive options that this Rockets team has, the combination of length and size and athleticism that they possess is so uncommon in today's NBA game, specifically with the importance on skill and spacing and stretching the floor and shooting a ton of threes. The Rockets maybe aren't as elite in that area, but there's a reason they're the number 2 seed in the Western Conference, and they are a defense-first identity, and they have the horses to get it done as well. You think about Amen Thompson, a one-of-one athlete, and I always say that knowing he has a twin brother. That's how special of an athlete Amen Thompson is. Firmly in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. Both teams have a depoy candidate in Amen Thompson and Draymond Green this season. And honestly, it's going to be such a fun series on both ends of the floor. When I think about the Rockets guarding the Warriors, one thing I am a little concerned about is the post-split action that Golden State finds so much success in. When they're either posting up one of Jimmy Butler or Draymond Green, you're getting away action, split action with Steph Curry coming off of off-ball screens, flying around the court like he always does. You could also turn that into staggers, twirls. There's so many things that Steph Curry does without the ball. And that's what makes this series so unique and why I think the ball pressure specifically for Houston is going to be so important. most teams tend to sag off of Draymond Green. Most teams tend to try and show their pressure to Steph Curry. You want to blitz him. You want to force the ball out of his hands. But the issue is when Steph Curry's running off the ball, making all of this stuff happen without the ball in his hands, if you have a lack of ball pressure on Draymond Green, if you have a lack of ball pressure on whoever's running the offense, whether it be Podziemski or Moses Moody for little stretches of time for Golden State, if those guys are comfortable, it makes delivering those passes to Steph Curry flying off of stagger screens or back cutting over pursuit angles so much easier. So I think for Houston specifically, whether it be Tari Eason or Dylan Brooks or whoever's guarding the basketball, you need to ramp up the ball pressure. I want full court pressure for a majority of the game, especially when Steph Curry isn't bringing the ball up the court. Now, when he does have the ball, I want that pressure to be amplified as well, but I think specifically in this series, it's really essential for Houston to pressure the heck out of Draymond Green, try and make Jimmy Butler uncomfortable. That's where I think Tari Eason's going to be extremely useful. And then obviously the three-point shot is going to be so enormous in this series as well for a variety of reasons. You think about Steph Curry, obviously, the three-point shot's the first thing that comes to mind, but specifically for Houston, I think this is where the story is going to be very, very essential. The Warriors are likely going to use Draymond in a variety of ways. Sometimes helping off of Dylan Brooks. You have that rivalry there, right? Where Draymond Green guarding Dylan Brooks, you can maybe get Dylan Brooks' head a little bit. Try and, disrupt the Rockets' normal offensive flow by trying to bait Dylan Brooks into hero-type jump shots, which we've seen him be susceptible to in the past in the playoffs. He's one of the few players with real playoff history and success on his side, as well as Fred VanVleet, the two veteran presences for the Houston Rockets. It'll be interesting to see how Draymond Green battles with Dylan Brooks and how often he's guarding him. But I can also see throughout the course of the series Draymond Green taking Alperen Şengün for long stretches of time. And how does that limit Şengün's short roll ability? And how does that ball pressure that Draymond Green can apply and honestly get away with too? The amount of fouls Draymond Green is allowed to commit per game is different than any other player in the league. Offensively, refs do allow him to set more moving screens. That's just a blatant fact. Honestly, if you watch the games, you know that. And it's not a detriment. I'm not trying to say that to diminish the Warriors or to diminish Draymond Green. It's something that Ime Udoka has to have these Rockets prepared on. You can't get frustrated in the moment. You have to understand that you have to play until you hear a whistle. And Draymond Green might do some things that should warrant a whistle and don't get a whistle. The Rockets have to fight through all of those moments. And for a young, inexperienced team, I think that's going to be really essential for them this year. In this matchup especially. The Warriors are a team with a lot of momentum right now. They've been playing really great after the trade deadline where they acquired Jimmy Butler. It completely transformed their team offensively, and it really heightened their defensive prowess as well, with Jimmy Butler's versatility and IQ being a really perfect match with Draymond Green on the defensive end of the floor as well as the offensive end of the floor. I think Steph Curry's off-ball movement, the Warriors' post-split stuff is going to be really, really challenging for the Rockets to deal with. But on the flip side, I think with Kevon Looney playing minutes, and I think with some of the guys the Warriors are going to be looking to have on the court, there's opportunities for Jalen Green, who is a high-volume mid-range shooter. Hasn't been a super great mid-range shooter, but very high volume. This is an important series for him, one that can really validate who he's becoming as an NBA player and maybe an NBA star. Now, he's someone who is a very streaky scorer, streaky shooter especially, coming off of a little break at the end of the regular season where there's, a few days off before the start of the playoffs. Will that affect him negatively, or could that be a huge benefit to him? We'll see how that kind of plays out as well. But I think mentally this is going to be a huge challenge for a Houston Rockets team that's very chippy, very, obviously, I think hungry is a great way to describe them, but it's going to be a tough series because you're facing such a mentally sharp team, a team that has played so many playoff games. This is one of the hardest matchups, and I think for the Rockets fans specifically, you might be saying, oh my gosh, of course it has to be the Warriors, and it's okay to acknowledge that you are probably a little concerned. This is not an easy matchup at all for the Houston Rockets, but I do think the Houston Rockets are a very, very good team. They earned the 2 seed in the Western Conference for a reason. I think this is going to be a long series. I do, but I ultimately do think that the Rockets can win this series, and I have them winning the series in 6 games. I have them beating Golden State. Finally, the Houston Rockets get over the hump and beat the Golden State Warriors. I think the Rockets are really, really athletically gifted, and I think that's going to challenge some of the Warriors, specifically at their age and kind of the lack of athleticism that this team has. I think they have the guys to frustrate Jimmy Butler at times. I think they're going to have the ball pressure to disrupt and disorient Draymond Green's usual playmaking greatness, and they have just enough to slow down Steph Curry just a little bit. I hate betting against the Warriors. I might come back regretting this pick, but I do have the Rockets in 6 games over Golden State, winning in the Bay Area even to close out the series. Now on to the 3 and 6 matchups here. The East 3 seed is the New York Knicks taking on the feel-good Detroit Pistons as the 6 seed. This is a wonderful opportunity for the Detroit Pistons to really get some of that playoff experience for Cade Cunningham, for Jalen Duren, for this young core nucleus, and they've obviously done a great job supplementing this young core with talented players, kind of following that Houston Rockets blueprint of bringing in high-quality veteran players like Tobias Harris, for example, someone who, when they signed that contract, admittedly, I did not love the contract value at how much they paid him, but obviously I was wrong. The benefits have paid out huge for Trajan Langdon and the Detroit Pistons this year. They have been very, very good. The shooting around Cade Cunningham has been elite, and that's specifically where I loved the addition of Malik Beasley. You also look at the benefit Tim Hardaway Jr. has brought to this team at times. The Detroit Pistons have really succeeded in their rebuild at this point, and very quickly after the Trajan Langdon hiring. So you've got to be feeling very optimistic and hopeful about the Detroit Pistons moving forward. I think this is a huge test series, though, for Jalen Duren, and the reason why the Knicks, first of all, I think they have a better starting lineup. You look at the roster that they've assembled together, right? With Brunson, Josh Hart, who can be a real big-time player in a playoff series because of the value of offensive rebounding and how he impacts the game in so many ways as a triple-double threat as a 6'5" wing. It's a very unique player archetype, but one that can be very beneficial for him. I think one thing I'm curious about, how often does JB Bickerstaff put Jalen Duren on Josh Hart? How often do they dare him to shoot? That's going to be a big question for me in this series. But then you look at the other wing-forward combo with Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, and then the headliner is Karl Anthony Towns at the center spot, playing off of Jalen Brunson, the team's captain, out of the point guard spot. I think 15 action, pick and roll between their center and point guard, with Brunson being the ball handler, is just going to be very, very devastating for this Pistons team to deal with. While Jalen Duren, I think, is a really great young player, someone who I have super high hopes and upside beliefs on moving forward. This is going to be a real challenge because of the pick and pop game that Cat presents. Also, I think about delay action, or as the trailer big in transition, where he's going to be occupying the top of the key or playing off the wing a little bit as the trail big man down the court. I think as long as the Knicks have their normal form of rim pressure and Brunson's getting to the rim as often as he typically does, I think it's going to be a hard series for the Pistons to win. And Pistons fans, there's no negativity in that. This is a huge success story season. This is a home run season for you guys. You have to be so over the moon with the turnaround that this team has had. JB Bickerstaff's been an excellent hire. This team has taken real strides forward. Cade Cunningham is the true 1A superstar that you were hoping he would be when you drafted him first overall in his draft class. Jalen Duren has been an absolute home run pick for them too. And you don't even have Jaden Ivey right now, so you're kind of playing with house money. The team, despite some injuries, despite some real roster turnover the last couple of years, has succeeded in a big way. Now, I do think the Knicks win this series in 5 games. I think the New York Knicks are quite a bit better. They have more length. They have more athleticism to throw at Detroit than I think the Pistons have, vice versa. But if the Pistons can turn this into a 3-point shooting challenge and get up and down the court quickly, play off the wings quickly, and advance the ball up the court, and then isolate their own 2-man action between Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren, I think you can find a ton of success that way as well against Karl Anthony Towns' drop coverage. It's going to be a fun series. I think there's going to be a lot of competitive games, but I do think ultimately the Knicks do win in 5, maybe 6, but more likely than not, I think it's going to be a 5-game series, and the Knicks come out very, very happy with the overall end result. But again, that's not to diminish the Detroit Pistons at all. It's been a huge home run season for them and a ton of success from what we've seen from the Pistons this year. Detroit fans, you guys got to be so happy with how this year has played out. The next one I want to talk about is the West 3 seed versus the West 6 seed. That is, of course, the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Minnesota Timberwolves and Luka Doncic, just the man the Timberwolves did not want to see. Timberwolves fans know exactly what I'm talking about. goodness, we're going to get Luka versus Gobert, except this time Doncic isn't in Dallas anymore. He's an LA West Coast guy now, and we'll see if that changes how this playoff series goes. But I think this is a home run matchup for the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are a smaller team for sure. They are a team that does not have a ton of size, and obviously the Wolves do have some things that can exert some force and pressure on the rim with Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle obviously being a big, strong, physical forward. And LeBron is dealing with a groin injury, which might limit or hinder him a bit. But one thing I do have to say, with Luka Doncic on the floor, LeBron James off the floor, the Lakers have been really, really great. And that's a testament to JJ Redick's coaching. Going into his first ever playoff series, I do think he is the better coach between himself and Chris Finch. I think he's an elite basketball mind, someone who really understands the value of spacing and pace on the offensive end of the floor. I think a ton of that comes from his playing career and understanding how beneficial shooting and floor spacing and gravity really is, and having the right set of actions with their chin action, everything that they do offensively, I just find myself gravitating toward liking a lot. And then defensively, I think with their scramble, play quick on defense, try and front the post, all of that stuff works really, really well in general. We saw the success they had a couple days ago against the Dallas Mavericks specifically, where they really shut down Anthony Davis, and his impact was almost non-existent in that Luka return to Dallas game. But even throughout the course of the year, they've done a good job post Anthony Davis trade, really flying around. You think about their matchups with Denver specifically earlier this year, and now you look at the matchup that Minnesota has, where Rudy Gobert isn't that talented offensive big man. So you might not even have to fly around as much. You might just have to show a little bit to the post. And obviously, I think one pressure that Gobert brings that Jokic didn't bring as much is that rim lob threat, right? Where you're looking at the value of, rim pressure and rim gravity without the ball. That's something Gobert does a great job with, but I know the Timberwolves extremely well, and I know that they don't always leverage that skill or that tool to their advantage as much as they really could. So I think for the Lakers, this is a great matchup for them. They're going to be able to show bodies at Anthony Edwards. I think Jared Vanderbilt, this is going to be a really fun series for him. One that, throughout the course of the series, maybe he gets played off the court because of his offensive limitations a little bit. But I think at the very beginning of the series, he's going to be one of the primary defenders attached to Anthony Edwards. And Jared Vanderbilt has no problem at all mixing it up, especially against the Tim Connolly Timberwolves, because remember, Tim Connolly traded Jared Vanderbilt away twice. So there's a little bit of that motivation there for the Lakers too, for one of their players who's going to be one of the primary defenders of Anthony Edwards, a former teammate of his who knows his moves a bit. Now, Anthony Edwards has had a great season. Anthony Edwards is a tremendous player. I don't think he's as good of a player as Luka Doncic, and I think when it comes to the Wolves' defensive identity, playing predominantly with drop coverage, you think about the value of the lob threat, Jackson Hayes, and you go back to last year's playoffs in the Western Conference Finals. Luka found so much success against the Wolves' drop coverage, something that I was completely and utterly shocked that the Wolves didn't go to their high wall. In fact, I asked Chris Finch about that last year. Chris Finch basically said that they didn't need to do that and that their pick and roll defense was just fine. But throughout the course of that series, had their pick and roll defense completely eviscerated. Luka hits game winners over Rudy Gobert, completely dominates, throws a ton of alley-oop lobs in that series. And now I think in LA with a better head coach than Jason Kidd, JJ Redick's a great coach. I think the Lakers are poised to win this series in 5 or 6 games. Again, I don't want to diminish the Minnesota Timberwolves at all. They've been playing really great basketball. They do have a very good overall team defense. Jaden McDaniels, though, is a little light to guard Luka Doncic. Obviously very long, athletic, does have the challenging skills out on the perimeter to at least make him work. But when it comes down to it, Luka's ability to bump, play balance, play off of 2 feet, I think is going to be a lot for the Timberwolves to overcome, just like it was in the conference finals. I don't think it's as lopsided as it was a year ago in the conference finals. I think there was a lot of mental challenges that the Wolves failed to overcome last year that won't be present in round 1 of this series. So I do think it probably goes 6 games, but I do have the Lakers ultimately winning the series in 6 in what's going to be a very fun, obviously highly heated series between Luka, Gobert, Anthony Edwards. There's a lot to love. There's going to be a little bit of love that isn't lost in this series too between these two teams. But I think it's going to be a very, very fun series and a very good series, one that you definitely don't want to miss at all. Now we get into the 4 seed and 5 seed matchups, and the Indiana Pacers taking on the Milwaukee Bucks, and this is a nightmare matchup for Milwaukee, especially without Damian Lillard. The Bucks just cannot be healthy at the right time. This is, I believe, their third or fourth postseason in a row where injuries have drastically impacted them, whether it was Chris Middleton missing time or Giannis missing time, of course, or playing injured. And then obviously Damian Lillard now being the most recent example of missing time at the wrong time. It's obviously unfortunate. Now we are hoping, all of us have to be hoping just on the human level that Damian Lillard is A-OK moving forward. Blood clots are nothing to joke about. I am wishing him best of luck and best of health moving forward. But for Milwaukee, it is crushing the timing of his absence specifically. And it's against a team that they really couldn't afford any absences. They've really struggled against the Indiana Pacers over the last 2 years, going back to last season in the playoffs, where the Pacers are just better than them. The Pacers have, for the most part, dominated the series. The season series against the Bucks have felt really comfortable in this matchup. And I think at the heart of that is Miles Turner. For Milwaukee, a team that, with the Kyle Kuzma addition is a bit more athletic now, a little bit more springy. Obviously, Kevin Porter Jr. has been a positive to that as well in terms of defensive athleticism and playmaking. He's had some big steal numbers for the Bucks since coming over from the Clippers. But all in all, I think for the Pacers specifically, one easy thing that they can go to is their 15 action, where you're going to pick and pop between Miles Turner and Halliburton as your ball handler. And against the slower-footed Brook Lopez, it just puts a ton of pressure on their defense to effectively contain the ball when Halliburton comes off of a Miles Turner screen. And then Miles Turner just ends up sitting at the top of the key. He's going to be hugely important as a trail big in this series. I talked about that for the Knicks going up against the Pistons and how I thought Cat gave them such a huge advantage in that series because of his trail big optionality, pick and pop game, all of those kinds of things that are going to be hugely beneficial for the Knicks against the Pistons. I think all of that will play out here for Indiana against Milwaukee as well. Now, the Bucks do have, their own stretch big man, splash tower in Brook Lopez, but I just think, the reliability of that is a little bit less than what you can do if you're Indiana going off of, Pascal Siakam, Tyrese Halliburton. Giannis Antetokounmpo is the best player in the series, but it's going to be a challenge for him to keep up with this highly gifted offense that Indiana has, where they can play fast effectively, they can play slow effectively, they don't turn the ball over much. Halliburton, been the point guard the entire second half of the season. It hasn't been talked about enough. He's an all-NBA second team kind of guy, at least this year. So the Pacers have been brilliant. They have definitely earned their seeding. They've been a really great team all season long, and they are going to win this series again. I think they'll win it in 5 games. You might be saying, wow, that's a really strong prediction. I just feel that good about this matchup for Indiana. I don't want to disrespect Giannis. He might be playing his last ever series as a Milwaukee Buck. That's the sad, unfortunate reality here. If the Bucks are bounced once again in the first round, Giannis might have his eyes set on a different destination. I wouldn't blame him. And Bucks fans, I don't think you should either. If he does request a trade, you're bound to win that trade. You're bound to get unbelievable value for him if he does ultimately hit the open market on the trade block. We'll see. But nonetheless, I do think the Pacers win this series. I think they win it fairly comfortably in 5 games. I could see it going 6. Again, there's a lot of series where I'm like 5, maybe 6, like right in that 1 game variance. If the Bucks win 2 games, it's not going to shock me. But I do think the Pacers will win this series, and I think they'll win it fairly comfortably. Then we get to the West 4 seed Denver Nuggets versus the 5 seed Los Angeles Clippers. And I think this is a very interesting matchup for sure. One that will have some challenges for the LA Clippers to deal with. Specifically, Nikola Jokic, the world's best player, very arguably, averaged a triple-double this season. First center in NBA history to do that. And I go back to the bubble series, right? Obviously, so long ago, no James Harden in that series, a really young Ivica Zubac. Paul George was still on this Clippers team. And the Nuggets were really young, unproven at the time, but in the bubble had some really great shooting variants and kind of bumped them up a couple pedestals. You think about the playoffs that Jamal Murray had that year. It really tested Ivica Zubac. The 2-man game between Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic was really, really challenging. But this is a different Clippers team now at this point in time. Kawhi Leonard, knock on wood if he's healthy, I still think he is arguably the very best player in the world when he's on the floor, engaged as a two-way player and feeling right. When he has that spring, that pop in his jump, he is just a different animal, a different beast. And Ivica Zubac has taken significant strides forward. Honestly, an underrated defensive player of the year candidate this year. Someone who is going to, I think, match up much better with Jokic at this point in time than he did a few years ago. Just a lot more comfortable in his drop coverage, a lot more comfortable contesting at the rim. Now, I'm not expecting him to stop Jokic. I'm not calling him a Jokic stopper or anything like that. I think he's better suited for this matchup now than he was 5 years ago. And I don't think anyone's shocked by that. Zubac was extremely young and needed a lot of development yet at that point in time when the Clippers were trying to win a championship with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard as their 1 and 2 there in LA. And especially in the bubble, things just didn't go right. This is a different series. These are two different teams. And I think one of the biggest differences is James Harden. He has been the calm in the storm for the LA Clippers, a team that won 50 games this year. You had other people on YouTube, all these other quote-unquote basketball analysts saying that the Clippers might send the first overall pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder this year. That was ludicrous. It was ridiculous. I said at the time that there's no way in hell the Clippers would do that. And look at that. They're a top 5 seed in the Western Conference. They won 50 games this season. They are unbelievable as a team. Jeff Van Gundy's been a tremendous coach for them. Their defense has been all world all season long. Norm Powell broke out in a big way. Addition by subtraction. You guys know what I'm talking about. This Clippers team is really good. Bogdan Bogdanovic, I think, can serve a niche role for them in this postseason. Chris Dunn, obviously, has been an instrumental part of them building a good team defense, especially. So I think going into this series, you're looking at Ivica Zubac taking that Nikola Jokic assignment for stretches, for sure. And then also there's going to be times where they put Zubac on Aaron Gordon and try and sag off of him, disrespect him. I think that kind of dichotomy, the amount of time he spends on Jokic versus the amount of time he spends almost not guarding Aaron Gordon is going to be really impactful in this series. Obviously, the Clippers, one thing that they don't have that the Wolves had, specifically in dethroning the Nuggets a year ago while Michael Malone was still their head coach, was 2 7-footers. They had Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. How much does Ben Simmons play into this series? It's hard for me to bet on him being a huge positive contributor in this series because I think, with Jokic, the less offensive players you play if you're LA, the more you allow Jokic to kind of slouch around, save his energy, not be the most engaged defensive player in the world. And I think that benefits the Nuggets a lot if you allow him to get away with that. I think spamming high ball screens, bringing Jokic up to the level of the screen, testing him, trying to get Zubac on short rolls, having Derrick Jones Jr. cut out of the corner, all of that stuff's going to be really huge. I think Chris Dunn and Derrick Jones Jr. will be the 2 primary defenders on Jamal Murray throughout the course of this first round series. I think it's going to be a very, very good matchup, and I ultimately do have the Los Angeles Clippers winning in 7 games. And I know Nuggets fans are not going to be happy with me. I totally understand that the Nuggets have the best player in the series and very, very easily could win this series. This is the series where I'm the most shaky on right now. You never know the health of Kawhi Leonard, but with how he's looked over the last 20 plus games of the season, he's been absolutely brilliant. James Harden has been an all-NBA caliber player once again. Ivica Zubac has been a fringe all-NBA caliber type of player and an all-defense caliber player this season. The Clippers, I think X's and O's wise, roster wise, honestly do have a better roster than the Denver Nuggets outside of the very top guy. Can Nikola Jokic lift the Nuggets over the Clippers? 100% there's a chance that he could do that, but I do think the Nuggets, specifically with a brand new coach, where not a brand new coach to them, but a new head coach where they don't have Michael Malone. It's a change, it's a shift. Now the Nuggets could come out extremely motivated, right? Kind of that shift, that might be a jarring, spurring moment for them that pushes them forward and motivates them to play in a different way with a little bit more energy, a little bit more oomph in their play. There's a lot of ways that this can go, and I think this series, which is part of why I saved it for last, is the hardest one for me to predict because I could see it where the Clippers dominate this series because I think their roster is better. I could see it where the Nuggets dominate this series because they have the best chess player of all time in Nikola Jokic. It's going to be a really fun matchup, a really fun challenge for both of these teams, and I'm extremely excited to see how this one ultimately ages. Again, drop your predictions down below in the comments section. And when it comes to my overall playoffs predictions, you guys got my play-in predictions already. When it comes to the overall playoff predictions, I think the Oklahoma City Thunder will represent the Western Conference in the NBA Finals. The 2 teams that I think have the best chance at beating them are the 2-seed Houston Rockets and the 3-seed Los Angeles Lakers. Now that doesn't sound super shocking. That doesn't sound all awe-inspiring, right? I'm picking the 2 and 3 seeds as the best, most likely to beat the 1-seed Thunder if they were to get to that, conference finals matchup with them. But the one thing is, I just think the Thunder are the most underrated 1 seed maybe ever. They have 68 wins for a reason. They're a great team. They've been brilliant all season long. People are questioning the experience. They're questioning this, that, or the other thing. I think the Thunder are going to cruise through the playoffs for the most part. They'll have a bump in the road here or there, but for the most part, I think they'll sweep the Grizzlies in round 1. I think going into round 2, the Clippers I don't think match up well against them. I really don't think Denver matches up well with Oklahoma City. I think the Thunder are going to get to the conference finals for sure. The Lakers, I think, could push them. We've seen what a Luka Doncic offense can do to Oklahoma City's defense, and we've also seen how Houston's defense can really challenge Oklahoma City's offensive shot creation. But I do think the Thunder represent the West in the NBA Finals this year. And then out east, I very much firmly like the Celtics and Cavaliers over the field in the Eastern Conference. I don't think the Pacers will beat the Cavaliers in round 2, and I do not think that the Knicks have any chance really at beating the Celtics in the second round either. To me, it really is Celtics or Cavs coming out of the Eastern Conference. Again, that shouldn't be shocking. Both of those two teams won over 60 games this year for good reason. Now, between the Cavs and Celtics, there's a lot of things I do like for both sides. For the Cavaliers specifically, the ability to kind of hunt matchups because of their two bigs. It gives you the option of putting Porzingis specifically in the pick and roll, whether he's guarding Mobley or whether he's guarding Allen. One way or another, you can bring him up to the level of the screen and force him to guard somebody out in isolation, out on the perimeter, force switches, force him to hedge and recover. And then with the Cavs short roll game, whether it's Mobley getting him the ball in the pocket and then letting him either lob it up to Jared Allen or finish as a play finisher himself. I do like that a lot for Cleveland. That's a huge advantage for them going into that series that a team like Dallas last year in the finals couldn't really exercise because they didn't have the playmaking combination in their front court the way that Cleveland does. So I think that's a kind of unique option that they have to attack Kristaps Porzingis that teams in the playoffs last year weren't able to really execute on against them, especially in the finals when we saw Porzingis healthy and again active on the court. And then I think for Boston specifically, what I love the most about their matchup against Cleveland is the ability to stretch the floor, space them out. And I think they're going to be able to minimize Evan Mobley's defensive impact a bit by doing that with your 5-out spacing, playing out of delay action. Porzingis as your trail big man. Rim protection is obviously so essential and huge, but I think for the Cavs specifically, playing two smaller guards in Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, that's going to be kind of a challenging situation with how Boston hunts mismatches, how they're able to exercise offensive advantage out of slips and switches and finding ways to get 4-on-3 advantage consistently. I think Boston is still the team to beat in the Eastern Conference and ultimately in the postseason. I think the Boston Celtics still are the best team in the NBA because I trust their ability to generate and make three-pointers more than any other team in the league. And with how much the three-point shot is valuable right now, with how unreplaceable it is for offenses, I think Boston, a team that won the NBA Finals last year, has that experience to kind of go off of. As long as they're healthy and playing the way that I know they're capable of, I think they're going to be really, really tough to beat. Now, I'm not saying it's a cakewalk to get there. I think their matchup with Cleveland could go 6 or 7 games. And I think a finals between Oklahoma City and Boston would maybe be the best finals we've seen in the last 20 years. It would be an unbelievable exhibition of talent and two differing styles of play, with OKC's ability to play out of a playmaking hub big man like Isaiah Hartenstein and their kind of defensive tenacity that they can win with. And then Boston has routinely been one of the best offenses we've seen while also still being an elite two-way team with very great gifted individual point of attack defenders and a very strong team defensive construct that limits some of the other team's offensive benefits and obviously can take away stuff at the rim with Porzingis' rim protection and finding unique matchups that benefit your team defense, something Mazzulla has been really great at his entire coaching career so far. I think Cleveland, Boston, OKC, I could see any of those three teams winning the NBA title. If you told me it was any other team, I'd be pretty surprised. I think those three should be considered the heavy favorites to walk away with the Larry O'Brien this year. I like Oklahoma City a lot in the West. I think Boston is the best team right now. But if you told me that Boston doesn't even make the finals, it wouldn't be shocking. So that's maybe where you give a huge edge to Oklahoma City. Again, let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. I really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.